His hands, small and calloused from a lifetime of hard work that had barely begun, trembled as they clutched the faded locket. It was the only thing connecting him to the father he'd never known. The man the whole town whispered had simply vanished. But the note in his pocket, a secret scrawled on a scrap of paper, told a different, darker story. It spoke of a name he knew, a man he had called boss, and a truth that would force a 12-year-old ranch hand to choose between the only life he'd ever known and the family he had just found. The scent of dust, horses, and possibility hung heavy in the air, a familiar perfume to young Josiah. At 12 years old, he was already a seasoned hand on the sprawling Double C ranch, his small frame wiry with hard work and a quiet determination that belied his age. The sun, a brutal painter of the western sky, was just beginning its descent, casting long, dramatic shadows across the endless plains as Josiah rode back to the bunkhouse, his trusty Mustang, dusty, a rhythmic counterpoint to the creaking saddle leather. Josiah's world was the Double C, a place of toil and unspoken truths. He'd arrived there as a boy, barely 7, after his mother, a woman of few words and a haunted gaze, had simply left him on the porch of the main house with a note that read only, "He's a hard worker. Take him in." Calhoun, the owner, a man built like a gnarled oak with eyes that held the cold glint of polished steel, had taken him in, not out of kindness but out of a shrewd assessment of cheap labor. Calhoun was a formidable presence, his voice a gravelly rumble that could cut through the wind and silence a rowdy bunkhouse. He ran the Double C with an iron fist, his prosperity whispered to be as much from questionable dealings as from honest cattle drives. Josiah, ever observant, had learned to read the subtle shifts in Calhoun's mood, the tightening of his jaw, the way his hand would instinctively stray to the Colt on his hip. Tonight, however, a different tension simmered in the air. As Josiah dismounted and unsaddled Dusty, he overheard fragments of a hushed conversation coming from the stable master's office, a place usually bustling with activity but now strangely subdued. "The old fool's getting close," a gruff voice, unmistakably Calhoun's foreman Jedediah, rumbled. "He's asking questions about that land the old mining claims." "Let him ask." Calhoun's voice, colder than usual, sliced through Jedediah's. "He won't find anything. We covered our tracks well enough." Josiah paused, his hand on Dusty's bridle. Mining claims? He'd never heard of any mining operations near the Double C. The ranch was all about cattle, vast herds that grazed on the seemingly infinite plains. Curiosity, a dangerous companion in a world of secrets, prickled at him. He moved closer, keeping to the shadows, his heart thumping a quiet rhythm against his ribs. "He even mentioned the boy," Jedediah continued, his voice dropping further. "Said he had a son he was looking for." Josiah froze. The boy? Could they be talking about him? His mother had always been vague about his father, a phantom presence in his young life. The few memories he had were fleeting, fragmented images of a kind man with a gentle smile and eyes that mirrored his own. "Ridiculous," Calhoun scoffed, a harsh, dismissive sound. "The boy is mine now, for all intents and purposes. Besides, even if he were to find him, what good would it do? The past is buried, Jedediah. Deep." Josiah's blood ran cold. "The past is buried. Deep." The words resonated with a sinister undertone. He crept away from the stables, his mind racing. His real father. Calhoun. Mining claims. A dark tapestry was beginning to weave itself in his young mind, threads of suspicion intertwining with a desperate hope for connection. That night, sleep was a distant dream. Josiah lay in his bunk, staring at the rough-hewn ceiling, the whispered words replaying in his head. He thought of his mother, her distant gaze, the way she'd flinched whenever Calhoun's name was mentioned. He'd always attributed it to her quiet nature, but now a new explanation presented itself, one far more unsettling. The next morning, Josiah approached his chores with a newfound purpose. He needed to find out more. He started with the stable master, Old Man Fitzwilliam, a weathered soul with a memory like an elephant and a penchant for storytelling. "Fitzwilliam?" Josiah began, trying to sound casual as he mended a saddle strap. "Heard talk about some old mining claims around here. Any truth to that?" "Fitzwilliam," his eyes crinkling at the corners, chuckled. "Mining claims? Boy, this land's only good for cows and dust. There was talk, way back, of gold, but it never amounted to anything. Just a few fools digging holes in the ground before they gave up." "Who were these fools?" Josiah pressed, trying to keep his voice even. Fitzwilliam squinted, scratching his grizzled chin. "Can't rightly recall all their names, but there was one fellow, a good man he was. Name of Eli Kincaid. He was convinced there was something big out there. Even brought his wife and little boy with him. Shame what happened." Josiah's heart hammered. Eli Kincaid. A wife and little boy. Could it be? "What happened to him?" Josiah asked, his voice barely a whisper. Fitzwilliam's jovial demeanor clouded. Mysterious disappearance it was. One day, he was just gone. His wife, she took the boy and left not long after. Never heard from them again. Folks said he probably just up and ran off, but I always had my doubts. Eli wasn't the type to abandon his family. Josiah excused himself, his mind buzzing. Eli Kincaid. A good man. A wife and a little boy. Disappearance. Calhoun. The pieces were starting to fit, forming a picture that was both terrifying and illuminating. He thought of his mother, her silence, her fear. Had she been running from something, from someone? Over the next few days, Josiah became a shadow, observing Calhoun and Jedediah, listening for any slip of the tongue, any hint of the truth. He noticed Calhoun's frequent trips to a secluded part of the ranch, a patch of land known as Rattlesnake Gulch. It was a desolate, rocky area, avoided by most due to its venomous inhabitants. But Calhoun would ride out there, often with Jedediah, and return hours later, his face grim, his movements agitated. One afternoon, feigning a need to check on a stray calf, Josiah ventured towards Rattlesnake Gulch. He moved cautiously, his senses heightened, his young mind alight with a dangerous purpose. He found what he was looking for, a small, almost imperceptible trail leading off the main path, partially obscured by thorny brush. Following it, he came across a hidden entrance, cleverly disguised with rocks and overgrown shrubs. It was a mine shaft, old and dark, the kind Fitzwilliam had spoken of. He hesitated, a chill tracing its way down his spine. This was dangerous. But the image of his mother's haunted eyes, the yearning for a connection to the father he barely knew, propelled him forward. Taking a deep breath, he lit the small lantern he'd brought, its flickering glow pushing back against the oppressive darkness. The air inside was cold and damp, smelling of earth and something else, something metallic and acrid. The shaft wasn't deep, but it branched off into several smaller tunnels. Josiah navigated the labyrinthine passages, his heart thumping in his chest, the shadows dancing around him like spectral figures. Then he saw it. A faint glint of something in the dirt. He knelt, his fingers trembling as he unearthed a small, tarnished locket. He wiped away the grime and the locket sprang open, revealing two faded daguerreotypes. One was of a woman, her face gentle and kind, strikingly similar to his mother's. The other was a man, with a strong jaw and eyes that were undeniably his own, Eli Kincaid, his father. Tears welled in Josiah's eyes, a mixture of grief and a profound sense of recognition. He clutched the locket, a tangible link to a past he'd only ever dreamed of. But his discovery wasn't over. Further inside the tunnel, he found crude markings on the rock walls, a rough map detailing veins of ore and dates. Dates that coincided with his mother's departure from the Kincaid mining camp. And then, a small, worn leather journal, tucked away in a crevice. He opened it, his hands shaking. It was Eli Kincaid's journal, filled with neat, precise handwriting. Eli had indeed found a rich vein of silver, a discovery that would have made him a wealthy man. But the entries grew increasingly frantic, detailing threats, demands, and the name that made Josiah's blood run cold, Calhoun. Eli had refused to sell his claim to Calhoun, who had apparently coveted the land for years, knowing its potential. The last entry was chillingly brief. Calhoun's men. They're here. Tell Sarah. Tell Josiah I love them. Josiah gasped, the truth crashing down on him with the force of a thunderbolt. His father hadn't abandoned them. He had been murdered, and Calhoun was the killer. He stumbled out of the mine, the locket and journal clutched tightly in his hands, his mind reeling with the weight of his discovery. The setting sun seemed to mock him now, its golden rays highlighting the injustice of it all. He had to tell someone. But who? Calhoun was powerful, feared. Everyone on the Double C was beholden to him. As he reached the edge of the gulch, he heard voices. Calhoun and Jedediah. They were coming back. Josiah dove behind a cluster of boulders, his heart hammering like a drum. "Did you check the old shaft?" Calhoun's voice, low and menacing. "Aye, boss. Nothing." "Looks undisturbed," Jedediah replied. "Good. Can't be too careful. That old fool Kincaid's brother, Arthur, is still nosing around. He's got no proof, but he's persistent. If he ever got wind of that silver—" Calhoun trailed off, his gaze sweeping over the landscape. Josiah held his breath, willing himself to be invisible. He heard them ride off, their voices fading into the distance. Josiah waited until he was sure they were gone before emerging from his hiding place. He had to get word to Arthur Kincaid. But how? He was just a boy, and the nearest town was miles away. He knew he couldn't trust anyone on the ranch. Jedediah was Calhoun's loyal dog. The other ranch hands, though not inherently malicious, were too afraid of Calhoun to cross him. He thought of Miss Ellie, the kind-hearted cook, a widow who had always treated him with a maternal warmth, but even she kept her head down. Her eyes often filled with a quiet apprehension when Calhoun was around. Josiah made his way back to the bunkhouse, the locket and journal hidden beneath his shirt. He needed a plan, and he needed it fast. His father's life was in danger, even if it was a past life, a life already brutally cut short. But Arthur Kincaid, his uncle, was still alive, still searching for answers. And if Calhoun thought he was getting close, Arthur's life was in peril too. That night, Josiah feigned illness, avoiding the communal dinner. He needed time to think, to strategize. He laid out the journal and locket on his bunk, the flickering lamplight casting dancing shadows on the worn pages. He reread the entries, each word a testament to his father's courage and Calhoun's ruthlessness. He remembered a conversation he'd overheard between two drifters passing through the ranch a few weeks back. They had spoken of a small, isolated cabin deep in the Badlands, where a reclusive old prospector named Silas lived. Silas was known for his distrust of authority and his uncanny ability to navigate the treacherous terrain. Perhaps he could help. The next morning, Josiah made his preparations in secret. He packed a small satchel with dried jerky, a canteen of water, and a compass he'd borrowed from the stablemaster's office. He slipped his father's locket and journal into his pocket, his most precious cargo. He planned to leave before dawn, under the cloak of darkness, hoping to get a significant head start before his absence was noticed. As the first slivers of dawn painted the eastern sky, Josiah led Dusty away from the bunkhouse, his heart a mixture of fear and determination. He rode eastward towards the forbidding Badlands, a landscape of jagged rock formations and thorny scrub, a place where only the most resilient dared to venture. He rode for hours, the sun climbing higher, beating down on him with relentless intensity. He navigated by instinct in the vague directions he'd overheard about Silas's cabin. The terrain grew rougher, Dusty's hooves finding purchase on loose shale and rocky inclines. He was acutely aware of the danger, the possibility of rattlesnakes, flash floods, or worse, being discovered by Calhoun's men. By late afternoon, exhausted and parched, Josiah finally spotted a wisp of smoke curling upwards from behind a cluster of towering rock formations. He urged Dusty forward, a surge of hope mingling with a lingering trepidation. Silas's cabin was a ramshackle affair, barely more than a lean-to built into the side of a cliff, but it was a welcome sight. An old man, his face a roadmap of wrinkles, sat on a stool outside, whittling a piece of wood. He looked up as Josiah approached, his eyes, surprisingly sharp, assessing the boy and his dusty Mustang. "Well now," Silas drawled, his voice gravelly. "Don't often get visitors out here, especially not young'uns." Josiah dismounted, his legs stiff and wobbly. "My name's Josiah. I need your help, Mr. Silas." He recounted his story, the words tumbling out in a torrent. The fear, the discovery, the danger to his uncle. Silas listened, his whittling knife still, his expression unreadable. When Josiah finished, he pulled out the locket and journal, holding them out. Silas took them, his gaze lingering on the locket, then opening the journal. He read the last entry, his lips pressed into a thin line. He looked up at Josiah, a flicker of something akin to respect in his eyes. Eli Kincaid. Silas mused. He was a good man. Came through here once, full of hope about his silver strike. Calhoun. I always knew he was a snake in the grass. Heard he was buying up land cheap around here years ago. Never put two and two together till now. Silas stood, a new resolve in his ancient eyes. You did good, boy. Real good. Now, we need to get word to your Uncle Arthur. He's been chasing this ghost for years. I know where he usually holes up, a small mining town called Redemption, a few days' ride south. But how? Josiah asked, a fresh wave of despair washing over him. Calhoun will be looking for me. He'll send men. He will, Silas agreed. But we're in the Badlands now, boy. This is my territory. Calhoun's men may be good at tracking cattle, but they ain't so good at tracking ghosts. Silas began to move, with a surprising agility, gathering supplies. We'll travel by night, take the back trails. We'll be shadows, Josiah, and we'll get that message to your uncle. Over the next 3 days, Josiah learned more about the Badlands than he had ever imagined. Silas was a master of evasion, a phantom in the desolate landscape. They traveled under the cover of darkness. The moon, their only lamp, their conversations hushed whispers against the vast silence. Silas taught him how to read the stars, how to find water in the most unlikely places, and how to blend into the shadows. They encountered Calhoun's trackers once, a small party of men led by Jedidiah, their campfire a distant, ominous glow in the darkness. Silas, with a cunning smile, led them on a wild goose chase, leaving false trails and subtle misdirections that sent the trackers off in the wrong direction. Finally, on the 4th day, as the sun began to paint the horizon in hues of orange and purple, they reached Redemption. It was a dusty, wind-battered town, a collection of ramshackle buildings clustered around a single saloon. Silas, his face grim, led Josiah to a small, unassuming general store. Arthur Kincaid usually gets his supplies here, Silas explained. If he's in town, he'll be here. As they entered the store, a man with a stern face and kind eyes was haggling with the proprietor over a sack of flour. He was older than Josiah, with lines etched around his eyes that spoke of worry and a relentless search. Josiah immediately recognized the resemblance to the faded daguerreotype in the locket. "Mr. Kincaid?" Silas called out, his voice cutting through the quiet hum of the store. Arthur Kincaid turned, his gaze wary, his hand instinctively going to the pistol on his hip. "Who's asking?" "My name's Silas, and this young man has something important for you." Josiah stepped forward, his heart pounding. He pulled out the locket and journal, handing them to his uncle. Arthur's eyes widened as he saw the locket, his fingers trembling as he opened it. He stared at the faded images, then at Josiah, a dawning realization in his eyes. "Eli," Arthur whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He looked at Josiah, his gaze filled with a profound mix of grief and recognition. You're Eli's boy, aren't you?" Josiah nodded, tears blurring his vision. "My name's Josiah, and Calhoun killed my father." Arthur read the journal, his face growing darker with each word. When he finished, he looked up, his eyes burning with a cold fury. "I knew it. I knew Calhoun was behind Eli's disappearance. But I never had proof." "Now you do," Silas stated simply. "And the silver, Arthur? Calhoun's been mining it all these years, just as Eli found it." Arthur's jaw tightened. He's going to pay for this. For Eli, for the silver, for everything. But before they could formulate a plan, the sound of hoofbeats thundered outside, growing louder with each passing second. A voice, familiar and chilling, sliced through the air. "Josiah, you little rat, come out here!" It was Calhoun. He had found them. Josiah's blood ran cold. He had led Calhoun directly to his uncle. Arthur pushed Josiah behind him. "Stay back, son!" He drew his pistol, his face a mask of grim determination. Calhoun and Jedediah burst into the store, their faces contorted with rage. Behind them, several more of Calhoun's men spilled in, their rifles at the ready. "Well, well, Arthur Kincaid," Calhoun sneered, his eyes flicking from Arthur to Josiah, then to the journal in Arthur's hand. "Looks like the boy found a way to cause trouble after all, and now he's brought you right to your own end." "It's over, Calhoun," Arthur said, his voice steady despite the overwhelming odds. "We have the proof. Eli's journal. It details everything. The silver, the murder." Calhoun laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Proof? What proof? A dead man's ramblings? And who's going to believe a fool prospector and a runaway ranch hand? No one. This is my land, Kincaid. Always has been. And now, you're going to join your brother." Just as Calhoun raised his pistol, a shot rang out. Not from Calhoun's men, but from the back of the store. One of Calhoun's men staggered, clutching his arm, a surprised look on his face. Silas stood there, a smoking rifle in his hand, a mischievous glint in his ancient eyes. "Don't count out the fool prospector just yet, Calhoun," Silas said, a wry smile playing on his lips. The unexpected shot created a momentary chaos. Arthur seized the opportunity, firing his pistol, striking Jedediah in the shoulder. The saloon door burst open, and a crowd of Redemption's townsfolk, drawn by the gunshots, spilled into the street. Among them, Josiah spotted the local sheriff, a tall, imposing man with a handlebar mustache. "What in tarnation is going on here?" Sheriff Brody demanded, his hand on his own pistol. "Calhoun's trying to murder us, Sheriff," Arthur shouted. "He killed my brother, Eli Kincaid, years ago for his silver claim. This boy, Josiah, Eli's son, found the proof." Josiah stepped forward, holding up the locket. "This is my father's locket, Sheriff. And this," he held up the journal, "is his journal. It tells everything." Calhoun, seeing the crowd and the sheriff, knew his game was up. His face, usually so composed, contorted into a snarl of defeat. He made a desperate move, lunging for Josiah, attempting to grab the journal. But Josiah, with the agility born of years of ranch work, dodged him. Arthur, seeing his nephew in danger, fired again, this time hitting Calhoun in the leg. Calhoun collapsed, cursing. Sheriff Brody and his deputies quickly disarmed Calhoun's remaining men. The townsfolk, who had long harbored suspicions about Calhoun's rapid wealth, murmured in agreement with Arthur's accusations. In the aftermath, Calhoun and his men were arrested. The journal, combined with Josiah's testimony and Silas's corroboration, provided irrefutable evidence of Calhoun's crimes. The silver mine, long a source of illicit wealth for Calhoun, was seized, its riches now destined for the rightful heirs. Arthur Kincaid, his face streaked with tears, embraced Josiah. "You're a brave boy, Josiah. Your father would be so proud." Josiah, finally in the arms of family, felt a warmth spread through him that he hadn't experienced since his mother had left him. He had found his father, not alive, but his memory, his truth, and in doing so, he had found his own place in the world. He looked at Silas, the old prospector, giving him a small, knowing nod. "You did good, boy," Silas repeated, a genuine smile on his weathered face. Josiah smiled back, a real heartfelt smile that reached his eyes. He had been a ranch hand, a boy adrift. Now, he was Josiah Kincaid, son of Eli, and the future, once a daunting unknown, now stretched before him, filled with the promise of a family, a legacy, and a justice hard won. The western sky, once just a backdrop to his solitary life, now seemed to hold a brighter, more hopeful dawn. If you enjoyed this incredible tale from the frontier, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories from the American West. Click on the video on the screen for another tale we think you will love.